Everybody, and welcome to the Spring 2022 garden tour. I'm going to walk you around and show you what's going on in our early spring garden. Here we have a flower bed right down by our road. I planted 200 Color Blends tulips in this bed in the fall, so we'll see how those do this year. It looks like I've got a little bit of work here to trim up this rhododendron and do a little bit of spring cleanup in this area in general. It's down by the road, so it's always getting full of nasty junk and salt and whatnot. The other side of our driveway bed is going to get completely redone, I hope, this year. I plan to pull out all the things here. They've been here since we moved in, and they're pretty messy, so you can see it's not looking great, but hopefully by the end of the season we'll get that buttoned up. Okay, so coming up the driveway, the first little flower bed over here is by our lamppost, and we have a couple of spring bulbs popping up. Those are some hyacinths, the azaleas, nice buds on them, ready to open as soon as it gets a little bit warmer out. We got some sedum popping through over on the side, and some other azalea bushes in there. I think that's a liatris. I'm not sure. And then in the middle near the pole, my son has some tiger lilies that always bloom really beautifully there. And then the third azalea in the back. This bed has been a little bit problematic since we moved here 6 years ago. These are the only 3 azaleas I saved from the previous owner, so I've been trying to nurse them back to health. Okay, up here in the long flower bed in front of our foundation, we have lots of spring bulbs popping up. Over here we have some beautiful crocuses. I think this was the Hocus Crocus bulb set from Color Blends. So those are scattered out throughout this foundation bed. We have an azalea, again, from the previous homeowner. This one I did renovation prune a few years ago, and it's coming back nicely. I have some tulips, more crocus, and some iris in this little area, along with some daylilies, some sedum. This area is pretty jam-packed, full of bulbs. And then over there is a little bit of a black-eyed Susan, a hydrangea, I think that's Bobo hydrangea, and in the back is a coralberry and another sedum here by the stairs. So everything is starting to come up, still a little bit early because we are in New England in Zone 6A, so we still have another month or so before it's safe to plant. In that spot that I just pointed out is going to be one of our concrete pieces, so when we get those set out in a couple of weeks, I'll fill that up. Okay, over on this side, I have a reblooming hydrangea here. That was a gift from my grandmother when we purchased this house, and it's all nice and budded up. So some years we get more early blooms than others, depending on our weather, and this year it looks like we're going to have some nice early blooms, fingers crossed. 2 more azaleas, again, those were saved from the previous homeowner. And then in the back there's a dwarf mugo pine that was planted 2 seasons ago, so this will be its 3rd year, so I'm hoping to see a little bit more growth on that this season. And then the 2 big evergreen bushes, again, those were from the previous homeowner. The only thing I have left here in the front is a sedum and a couple of crocus bulbs, so we're going to work on that area this season. And then coming around the side of this flower bed, we have the 2 large evergreens, and if you look deep in there, there's a tiny little boxwood. I popped that in there to overwinter, a nice sheltered spot near the foundation so that it didn't die, but I'm going to plant that out this year. We have an endless summer hydrangea here. This always performs very nicely for us. Lots of blooms on it every year, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. And again, we just trimmed back these evergreens the other day, so it's a little bit messy in here, but in this corner we have a sedum. And then around the corner, I've done some work in this flower bed already this year, so I had extended this out. It used to end right there at the drain pipe, and I made it just go slightly around the corner because I wanted to plant out this magnolia. Now, the supervisor bit that magnolia in half at the end of last season, and I nursed it along in a pot over the winter. It's got some nice buds on it, so I'm hoping it will survive. And I've put some hosta and a couple of heucheras that I divided early into this little area as well. So that's a developing area for this year. As you can see, there's no mulch or anything. It's brand new. So spinning around, we have this island flower bed, and it's under this beautiful old dogwood. So our house is 30 years old. This dogwood was planted when the house was built, so it's approximately 36-year-old dogwood. It's full of buds ready to start blooming, and it is pink. When it blooms, it's absolutely gorgeous, but it was struggling last year, so we have treated it with iron and given it some fertilizer spikes to hopefully revive it. This bed is filled with daylilies. When our neighbor moved away last year, she asked me to come and divide up all of her lilies, and so we filled this entire bed. So it should be a really beautiful show this year. And then there's also some daffodils popped in there. This little side bed that I share with our neighbor hasn't been touched yet. I haven't done any cleanup yet, but it's full of hosta and 2 old lilacs. I'm not sure of the variety. They don't rebloom, but they do bloom nicely. I have renovation pruned this one once because it was really struggling when we moved in. And it's doing a little bit better. It's a big mess in here. And then this very large one, I did not have to completely renovation prune, but I have pruned on it a little bit, and it has improved. So I do see lots of green growth and lots of buds coming up. And then we have another big rhododendron again over here, and this one is struggling, guys. I don't know what this vine is. It grew up in the middle of this flower bed, and it is just strangling everything. I tried to dig it out a few seasons ago and couldn't quite get it all, so I'm going to have to try something new this year. So over here along this fence line, this is a relatively new fence. We put it in 2 seasons ago, and there was nothing here. So earlier this spring, a couple of weeks ago, I dug out this flower bed along the side, and I'm going to slowly fill it up. I've already popped in some hosta over here, which obviously you can't see yet because they're not popping through. But that was just divided up from that flower bed down by the road. And then my friend split some Hakanakloa for me, so I have some Japanese forest grass there and a sky pencil holly behind. That's brand new. And then in the corner I have a weeping blue cedar. I placed a fountain, and again there's some hosta underneath there as well. A boxwood that had been potted up, and I'll show you where it had been last season. And again, there's more hosta hiding under the soil. So hopefully we get a nice show out of that this season. I don't expect it to look, full and glorious yet for a couple of seasons, but hopefully it will fill in. Okay, so if we go through our fence gate into the backyard, we will see that I have quite a lot of work to do here in the back. I have a boxwood hedge here that needs trimming very badly, and this we call Anthony's garden. That is my son's name. He has designed this area. He wanted a nice little area to sit, so he has a gazebo with a bench, and underneath that tarp is a beautiful water fountain that I built last year. So moving up to this bed, we have some daylilies, some hibiscus that I just cut down, some sedum. That is a smoke bush. Looks like it's getting ready to bud out. Not quite fully swollen buds yet, but it's starting. So hopefully that blooms this year. That's a new plant. Another hibiscus here with a cage around it so the dog doesn't eat it. And then the rest of the Color Blends tulips are all spread out throughout this area. I believe there were another 150 placed in this bed in the fall. So far it looks like they're getting nibbled a little bit by the squirrels, but thankfully Duncan does his job and keeps them mostly away. So over here we have a blue diamond spruce. That is again new. Last year we just planted that. This whole bed was just made last year. It used to be Anthony's swing set, and when that sort of stopped being functional for him, we removed it, and that's why he got to design this area. So looking back is just the rest of these tulips, some more sedums, and this is again really a developing area. You'll see a lot of areas in our yard are really developing this year, so there's quite a lot of work to do. but we'll get it all done. And then over here we have a peony that looks like it's just about to start popping up. I'm glad that that survived. The rock is there because the dog was trying to eat it. And coming around the front of the flower bed, again, just another view. He has this absolutely beautiful pergola he picked out online, and his bench that he built by himself. He was very proud. We put in some solar lights. And over here we have a Cordana mini rose. I'm hoping that this rose is going to come back. We transplanted it from the other side of the yard last year when we started filling up this bed, and it's really not looking its best right now, but I do see down deep in there a little bit of red new growth, so I'm hoping it made it. It will have been its 3rd year, but again, it was transplanted in the fall, so I'm hoping that it survived our winter. Over here we have a little bit of sedum lining this little path that he added. Again, this was all divided up, so none of these plants, with the exception of the spruce, are new. Everything was either divided or moved from other parts of the garden, which we're pretty proud of because I like to use what we have. I have lots of daylilies in here, some coneflower, some blanket flower, and lots of iris, which never died back all the way to the ground last year. Our weather is pretty funky, so we'll see what happens with that this year. Over here we have the replacement magnolia. After Duncan bit the other one in half, my husband bought me a new one. So here it is. It's the Jane magnolia, and it looks like it's ready to go. The buds are just super swollen, ready to pop. I'm hoping we get a nice display out of it, and unfortunately that is the ugly fence that keeps Duncan from biting that one in half as well. He's generally pretty good, but for whatever reason that particular tree was very appealing to him. Anyway, over here we have some catmint. I think it's cat's pajamas, Nepeta, and a few more bulbs popping through, so it's nice to see some greenery. What's left of that was a tall phlox. I am not sure if that survived. It doesn't look like I see any growth coming out of it, but we'll give it a few more weeks and see. It's still very early here. We still have some freezing temperatures, so I don't expect a lot yet. Over here we have 2 bird's nest spruce that are not looking great, guys. These have been struggling since they were planted. The week I planted them, we had a friend come visit with their dog who unfortunately decided to use this one as a bathroom, and I think even though I poured water on it, he just fried it. And so I'm not sure if it's going to recover. I am going to give it this season and give it a chance. I've fertilized it with a little bit of Proven Winners fertilizer. Hopefully it bounces back. Over here we have 2, if you can even see it, small hydrangea starts. These were taken as clippings from other hydrangeas in the yard last year, and I did fully root them indoors, and then once they were fully rooted I planted them out. So they have just been sticks, but they do have roots, so hopefully we get some growth out of those this year. I have 2 poles there, so I remember where I put them and we can keep a close eye on them. Then I have 2 more panicle hydrangeas. These were from the Arbor Day Foundation. I think we got 5 free hydrangeas 2 years in a row. So this is their 2nd year. They've put on a lot of growth since being mulched into this bed. And you'll see I have some more that don't have anywhere near as good of growth. So we'll take a look in a minute. I have 2 more lilacs. These are the only 2 bushes on this side of the yard left from the previous homeowner. So when we purchased this house, the whole yard was a mess with overgrown and not taking care of shrubs. Those are the only 2 left over here. So here is all of the free hydrangeas that we got from Arbor Day Foundation, and so they're very small. They did leaf out fully last year. They looked, pretty nice. No flowers yet, so it doesn't look like they're big enough yet, I don't think, to bloom. So we'll see what happens this year with this year's growth. They're all very, very small, and they're all marked like that because we don't want to run them over with the lawnmower or hit them with the weed whacker. So you see we still have fall cleanup to do, lots of leaves still around the yard, and we're again in New England, so it gets pretty wet and messy here over the winter, so we just leave those until it dries out. Over here is a Japanese maple, beautiful red color once it leaves out, And then underneath we just have some daylilies. These were from a garden group I'm in. Somebody was dividing some, so I went and picked them up. Over here we have a holly. I am not sure of the variety. This was here when we moved in, along with the shed and tree. We have some plans for this area. Hopefully we get that underway soon. And then all along this back fence are forsythia. And these, when we moved in, were almost 20 feet tall and completely blocking the entire fence line. You could not walk through. They came out into the yard a good 10 to 15 feet, and they were a mess. So those were renovation pruned last year. We'll see how they come back. This is a huge lilac tree, and it's old, guys. I'm not sure how old. I would assume it's almost as old as the house because it's very large, very overgrown, but it's going to bloom, so we're going to let it do that and see how it comes out. And it's just a closer look here at this forsythia. And again, basically just straight forsythia along this back fence. There's nothing too exciting. And there, I'll show you a view of the yard. Most of it is grass. Again, we have a dog and a 9-year-old, so I don't want to take up all of the space for flower beds. They like to run around back here. Okay, over in this flower bed, I have a weeping willow. That is my favorite type of tree. So we planted one last year. It hasn't done much, but I expect that it will put on a little bit of growth this year. And this area is what my son affectionately calls the hosta graveyard. Anytime I dig out a hosta from the previous owner that was placed where it doesn't belong, it ends up in this flower bed, so there's a ton. Over here we have a hydrangea. This little guy got crushed when our windows were replaced, and so I moved him up there as a sort of nursery spot, and he seems to be doing well, so he's going to stay. And again, here's just a close-up checking to see if some of these hostas have come in, and it's a little too early still, so they will fill up this entire area from that front tree all the way back to the weeping willow, except that I do have two little Lenten roses here that don't look like they're doing well. I can't tell if they've rotted. Obviously last year's growth hasn't been cleared off yet, but it looked like I was getting some new growth coming out of the base, but they're very soft and mushy. So again, I'm going to leave them and wait and see. Here is another hydrangea. This is, I believe, a tiny tough stuff or a tough stuff hydrangea. And it was just planted last season, so this will only be its second year. We'll see how that does. It does appear to have some buds, which is great. So we'll give that a chance. This, I am not sure what it is. I could not dig it out when I tried to last year, so it came back. We'll have to try to address that this season. And then over along this side of the fence, we have one lilac that was just renovation pruned last year, so I don't expect too much. A forsythia. And then this is an Invincible hydrangea, I believe. No, I'm sorry. This is a Pinky Winky hydrangea, proven winners. And this was planted 3 years ago, so we'll see how that does. And the final forsythia on this side that's left. Again, this entire fence line was solid forsythia when we bought this house. Most of it's been removed. This one, I'm not sure if it's going to survive. Half of it is definitely dead, but I see some growth on the other side, so I'm going to leave it. This is the big flower bed that I put in 3 years ago, so this will be its 4th year. And guys, you wouldn't even recognize this area when everything is in bloom. You almost can't see the fence, which is great. But I did lose that heather, so I think I'll have to replace that this year. And I can't really see much coming up yet, but this will be all daylily over here, along with some lavender. There's so much in this bed, guys. I'm probably going to have to move some out of it this year. I had to move a couple of things last year because it was just getting too big. And primarily the biggest things in this bed are the Weigela, which is, I believe, a wine, something wine, I can't remember the name, but it's a beautiful dark brownish purple. It looks like I've got some bulbs popping up here that someone's been chewing on. Another dwarf mugo pine and some sedums. That sedum right there to the left, I know I'm going to move that guy out, and I'll probably put him in that front bed when I get to retool that a little later in the season. It's just too close to the mugo pine, and it gets really big and it looks messy, which I don't care for. I have a heuchera here again, they always, I know they're supposed to be sort of evergreen in some people's zones, but here in 6A, they sort of end up looking pretty bad over the winter, but it should come back nicely. There's a perennial grass. This is a tall phlox. I think this is one of the new Proven Winners ones that just came out last year. So it's either ultraviolet or the other new one that came out. One is one and the other is the other. So they're both the new tall phlox from Proven Winners last year. So hopefully those come back because they are beautiful. That is a Pearl Glam Beauty Berry. That is the last thing in this garden that will wake up. It takes a really long time, so I don't expect to see anything there. Then I have a small stand of Russian sage and another Cordana mini rose. So again, I don't know if the mini roses made it this year. We'll see. So I get a little too early. So this is a tree I planted 3 years ago. It is I believe it's called a Purple Fountains Weeping Beech, or I'll put it up on the screen. And then down here I have another sedum and the other boxwood that I took out of the pot, and then the Pinky Winky hydrangea, which grew huge last year. In fact, I've already trimmed that back. A boxwood who lives here and has always lived here, which is why he looks better, and some more daylilies up in the front, and that's just the opposite view. Looks like, I'm not sure what I'm focused on here. Oh, something that I cut back and I don't know what it was, but we'll find out as things begin to show. Over here is where I usually have a big statue placed. In fact, it's the statue in the opening usually lives right where that rock is. And then on either side of it are two very large allium plants. So we'll see how many blooms we get this year. And the other Pinky Winky hydrangea. And then along the front over here we have a false cypress, and I believe that's a Hinoki false cypress back there. It's its 3rd year. Hasn't done much, so hopefully it puts on some growth soon. And evidence of the supervisor having been playing in my flower bed, and my favorite tree in the whole garden, which is the Weeping Blue Atlas cedar. My parents' garden has one that is about 20 years old and it's huge, so I'm so impatient for that to grow. I have the other forsythia here on this side. This one is huge. It looks beautiful when it's in bloom for a week, and then it's just a nice big green filler for that corner. And then over here is the Invincible Spirit hydrangea. This is always the first hydrangea in the garden to open. It's got some beautiful buds. So then over here on this side of the fence we have our rain barrel ready to go. I just have to top that up with soil and then we can get that planted for spring. It should be in a couple of weeks here. And then this flower bed, now this one is only 2 years old, and here I have a Japanese maple. I'm not sure if that survived. We'll have to wait and see. I have some iris getting ready to pop up and some tulips that should be popping through. Then this bed was filled the rest of the way last year with annuals, so I think I'm going to do that again this year. Here we have a weeping red bud. It is its 2nd year, so it's pretty small. It does bloom, so we'll see what happens there. And then another stand of Nepeta cat's pajamas over here. And then I have a beautiful wind chime and bird feeder and some more tulips, and it looks like Mr. Squirrel has definitely been chomping at that one. And over here we have some allium. Right there on that concrete pad is a fountain that will come out in the next few weeks, and a lolly-popped arborvitae. I have some peonies pushing their way up, which is great. They came back. I only planted those last year, so those are new. I'm glad to see. I'm always happy and relieved when I see that something comes back. It's such a harsh climate here, so just a little bit of close-up on the red bud. It is getting ready to bloom. Not quite there yet, but I do see that it is covered with tiny little blooms, and this will get flowers before it gets leaves, so it develops flowers right there on its stems, which are absolutely gorgeous. So again, everything is relatively new here. We had to start a lot from scratch. This is a Walt Disney rose. This was an anniversary present from my husband 2 years ago, and that looks like it's coming back nicely. Then these flower beds I had a local woodworker make for us. I am terrible at growing food, and so I usually fill these with annuals, and I never cleaned them out last year, so that's on the to-do list for the next couple of weeks. As you can see, they need topping up with soil, and I just need to get all of these petunia branches out of here because that's what I had in here last season. So coming around here out of this flower bed and up to the first garden arch. So we have two arches leading into our patio area, and both of them have roses on them. And this is a pink rose whose name I can't remember. If I remember it, I'll pop it up on the screen. But it definitely fared well over the winter. These were David Austin's, and I just planted them last spring. So not much growth yet, but hopefully we will see some. They've been lashed already to the arbor, so what was long enough to get attached has been attached. And there's just a look at what it looks like. This was a Facebook Marketplace find, as most of my garden art is. Then I have a small circle here filled with boxwoods, and again we had some heavy rains last night, so it's pretty wet out here. And then this is the second arch, and this one has the Zephyrin Druin climbing rose on it. And this put on way more growth than the other rose last year, so as you can see it really has quite a few of its branches already attached to the arbor. I'm trying to attach those so that they're going horizontally so that we get lots of blooms, and it did have lots of blooms last year. And then this is the rest of the boxwood. It's going to be a broken hedge when it fills in, but these guys have been growing really slowly. So then over here in front of our deck, we have another bed that's going to be a work in progress this year. We removed a bunch of stuff because the buddleia gets enormous and was just blocking out the sun from everything. So what's left is two salvias, the buddleia, and a sedum. And so we're going to add some more to it this year. And then this is a brand new plant I planted a couple weeks ago. It is a plum, and there's a quick picture of the tag. So it's got some leaves going. I don't expect it to bloom or blossom this year because we'll still have a couple of frosts that will probably kill off all of that green. And then we have a boxwood that I need to trim up. So coming around here up onto our patio, we just have a couple of pots that I still have to clean up from last fall. Those are perennial mums. And then I have two topiary evergreens in these two pots. So those live there year round. Those were planted in the fall. So again, not much growth from last year. We'll have to clean those up. Those are Alberta spruces, or dwarf Alberta spruces. And then over here is just my herb garden that I didn't clean out in the fall. So I'll have to get all of these restarted and topped up with fresh soil over the next few weeks in preparation for our herbs. And then finally over here we have a fig, and it is not looking great. Again, this was just planted a couple weeks ago, so planted dormant bare root, and a couple leaves that were out didn't make it, but I do see some buds, so hopefully that revives. And again, we've had a rainy, drizzly New England cloudy morning here. This is just a quick view of what it looks like looking out of the yard over the deck. And I forgot to show you that bed. It is just filled with iris and daylily and my armillary that I picked up a couple of years ago. So once those all fill in, you will not even be able to see the wellhead behind them. So coming down and back out, we'll just go look at the last area. So all of this was put in 2 years ago, the path. We do want to add one on the other side, so hopefully that happens this season. Okay, so coming through the gate is the last little area, and this is our sort of side patio. We don't really use this area for much. I think the previous homeowner used to park his camper over here. But along the side of the fence, we have daylily and a perennial grass up the side again. These are more of the lilies that my neighbor gave me. And then over here I have a trellis with a clematis, and I think it did make it. Again, this was just planted last year, sort of in the middle of the summer, and it did bloom, but it didn't get very large. So I do see some growth on it at the base and some buds, which is good news. Hopefully that comes back. And the second, more daylilies, and then the second arbor also has a different clematis on it, which also looks like it's got a few buds at the base, which again, I'm always surprised and happy to see that something made it through a New England winter here. So hopefully we get some growth. I know not to expect too much growth, but that's about how big it got last year. We'll see what happens this year. Once we give it some fertilizer, it should hopefully take off. And then there's just a view back down to where we started at that front flower bed that's full of tulips getting ready to bloom. And a quick look at these large flower pots that I picked up last year. Now these had those 2 boxwoods that I pointed out that had been just transplanted. So I pulled those out of here this year because I don't want to leave these pots over the winter again. One of them didn't fare well, even though they're fiberglass. And they say they're weather resistant. They're not New England weather resistant. So I'm going to be filling those, I think, with either cannas or elephant ears this season, so that when winter comes around, I can pop them out and put those into the storage for the winter. Well, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully we get to see some things develop here within the next couple of weeks. Again, our last frost date is not until May, so we have a while to go yet, but I'm glad you took this early spring walk with me. Thanks for watching. Bye.